Now recognize Mr. McCaul for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing. And I also want to thank Administrator Power for joining us today. Let me say I really enjoyed our phone call last month. I thought it was very productive. You're very well qualified, and I look forward to working with you along with the chairman. As we look at the many global challenges, including COVID-19 recovery, the work of USAID and our partners has never been more important. I'm gravely concerned about the growing humanitarian emergency and refugee crisis that is brewing in Afghanistan right now. Hard-fought gains to advance stability, women's rights, and democracy are being wiped out as the Taliban continues to retake that country. The president has reiterated U.S. assistance to Afghanistan will continue post-withdrawal, but I would find that more difficult as the Taliban takes over. As the security situation worsens, I'm concerned about your ability to monitor and implement these critical assistance programs. Turning to Africa, as the chairman said, there are many spots around the world and many crises, but in Africa, the man-made famine in the Tigray region of Ethiopia threatens the lives of millions. And the government of Ethiopia continues to restrict humanitarian aid access and the people of Tigray who are starving. I'm also concerned by rising instability and terrorist activity in northern Mozambique and in the Sahel and in coastal West Africa. In 2019, Congress passed my Global Fragility Act. The law requires the administration to coordinate diplomatic, development, and defense efforts. This will help stabilize conflict areas and address the root causes of fragility. Yet the selection of priority countries by this administration is over 6 months late, and I hope, Administrator, you and I can work together with the listing of those countries. Turning to the Western Hemisphere, the crisis at our southern border is the worst that I've seen throughout my professional career. USAID plays a critical role in supporting economic growth and in combating violence and corruption to address root causes of migration. In fact, Administrator Power, I talked to your predecessor, Mark Green, just this last weekend about efforts that can be taken in the Northern Triangle, Central American countries to help further private investment, which I think would greatly get to the root cause of the migration. In Cuba, we have historic protests that demonstrate the people's rejection of the communist dictatorship there. I believe this administration must support their democratic aspirations and hold regime officials accountable for human rights violations. And then in Haiti, recent unrest and threatening the assassination is threatening an already fragile political and economic situation. Also concerned by the humanitarian crisis and suffering in Syria, Yemen, and Venezuela with no end in sight. And around the world, USAID plays a critical role in countering the malign investments of the Chinese Communist Party, especially in the Indo-Pacific. And on the top of these global challenges, the COVID-19 pandemic has erased years of progress towards ending extreme poverty. It has pushed millions more people into severe food insecurity, malnutrition, and has destabilized fragile states. That's why I believe that the United States needs to get our vaccines out of the door into these nations. Our allies and partners are left in limbo, unsure what to expect from both U.S. assistance and COVAX allocations. It is disturbing that COVAX has announced that it will purchase and distribute less effective Chinese manufactured COVID-19 vaccines. In fact, we had an amendment on our markup yesterday on this from Ann Wagner. But especially as the CCP continues to use vaccines to further their own coercive political and economic agenda, it is my assessment that we are not winning in this vaccine diplomacy. And I believe the administration needs to correct that. In the last year, Congress appropriated over $16 billion to support global COVID-19 response efforts. This was critical funding to combat the pandemic overseas, as well as address second-order impacts. And then this year, the administration requested an increase of $7 billion. And while I understand there are rising global needs, I am concerned the agency will not be able to effectively do this program and the money, particularly on top of the unspent COVID funds. According to the latest OIG audit, USAID missions are unable to fully monitor foreign aid programs due to COVID-19 limitations. The U.S. has long been the largest foreign donor, but we can't do this alone. And as the U.S. does more, our partners need to step up as well. So I urge the administration to maintain the Journey to Self-Reliance framework championed by former Administrator Mark Green. Ending the need for foreign aid should be the goal of all of our development programs. And ultimately, the U.S. model for foreign aid and the goal of advancing country self-reliance stands in stark contrast with the malign efforts of the Chinese Communist Party. The so-called aid provided by the CCP through its Belt and Road Initiative pushes countries into crippling debt traps while bolstering authoritative regimes. Our foreign aid must serve as a clear alternative while saving lives and projecting U.S. global leadership around the world. So, Administrator, you obviously have a lot of work to do, but as always, the Chairman and I are very much looking forward to working with you on these many challenges. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McCaul. Thank you very much.